My first love is back for one night only. Can I handle the heat? It's been 5 years since I last saw Raffaele, now known as Ryan, and once my first love, my ex-bandmate, and irrevocably, the one who left me and the whole band in one night. I thought I was done with him, but here I am, staring down at the festival lineup with his name right beside mine. And to speak of the devil, he just came in, walking as if he owned the place. I sighed, preparing myself to hear his voice for the first time in a while. Luca stood right behind me, his hand on my shoulder, meaning his support. Oh my, Raffaele smirked. Thought you'd be headlining your own show by now. I shrugged, trying to pretend my indifference. Don't be so condescending. You know how much this event matters to any band, I retorted back. So you gotta pump it up, darling, or you'll never stop performing to that old geezer with nowhere else to spend his money besides playing with his kids' dreams, he said with a soft chuckle. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. He was still smiling, his hands crossed over his chest, confident and knowing. Right, and leaving to play backup in a band while trying to make it solo was your big dream? I thought you were going to quit. After all, that's what you do best, I shot back. His smile faded away, and Luca squeezed my shoulder. I didn't come back for you, Marco. That was it. It hurt to breathe at that point, but I stayed on my feet. You wish, huh? I snapped back. Raffaele stepped forward, and his smell came right through my nose, making me sick to my stomach. He sighed, his voice lowering. I never thought you'd still be bitter. I snorted outrage. Yeah? I'm not the one who left without a word, though. Raffaele paused, and I could see the engines in his brain working through while he bit his response. Finally, he spits. You still don't understand. I held his gaze, my blood boiling. Try me. Luca pulled me a bit forward, and right when I was considering the problems of punching him in the face, Elisa Moretti showed up, all pretty in her rocky band looks, looking like a runaway girl. Hello, boys, she said, loud and happily as always. Are things heating up here? As if you don't know the answer. I'm on below enough for only Luca to hear, and his laugh made me smile too. So, Marco, Raffaele, Luca honey, where's Marcello? Never mind. Boys, this is a reunion everyone's been waiting for. I frowned, glancing at Raffaele. Didn't know anyone was waiting. Especially not me, Raffaele muttered. Elisa widened her smile, but she knew us too well to know how much tension was on the ground. Come on, you two. Imagine the impact. One song, just like in the old days. Your fans would lose their minds, she said with that wide smile of hers. We're not doing that, I said instantly. For once, I agree with him, Raffaele replied under his breath. Elisa sighed loudly, her patience going to the clouds already. You've always been difficult, but think about it. A few songs, you'd steal the show. My voice tightened. Not interested. Same here. Let's not pretend it'll be worth revisiting it, Raffaele shot back. Look, I get it. Old wounds and all. But this isn't about just the two of you. Your fans are desperate for this. And the sponsors want it too. Are you really going to let them down? Smart woman. There was no way to say no to the ones who paid for that. I exchanged a tense look with Raffaele and Luca, sighed, and rubbed my temples. Fine, I said reluctantly. 3 songs. But I'm not doing any emotional stuff. Raffaele smirked, his voice now sharp. Wouldn't expect you to. Emotions aren't exactly your thing. I glared at him. You have the balls to say that? Quitter. I could see his fists closing, and I smiled at him, pissed off so much I couldn't care less. Perfect. Elisa said loudly, clapping hands. Rehearsals are in Studio B, starting now. You'll find a way to work together again, I know it. The show starts at 11, so good luck. She left, and the three of us stood there, thinking about what to do or say next. Me and Raffaele were still staring, neither of us willing to back down first. Luca grabbed his drumsticks and called us into the room. This was a mistake, Raffaele grumbled as passing through the door. For once, we agree, I said, moving to the mic before adjusting my guitar. Guys, we only have about 3 hours, Luca said. You know what to do, right? My memory's so good, Raffaele replied. I rolled my eyes and prepared to take a look at the music list. We'll sing the hit ones, okay? Luca asked, basically ordering since he wouldn't agree with anything in peace. Okay, Mom, I joked. Trying to ease my mind, I sat down on the stool and felt the cold metal of the guitar in my hands. That was a regular feeling, not doubts or fear. Since Raffaele left, it took me a while to recover, but now the mic and the guitar are my safe space again, and I won't let him take it from me again. Not anymore. He was adjusting his bass, and the sound was good, as always. Our official bassist was informed about that before us, so he stayed with his girlfriend. I don't know where, and Lucas said he'd meet us in a while. I decided to not give a damn, so I was focused on recovering the rhythm of my breaths and the tone of the strings. Rafa, Luke said again, breaking our silence. Is your band okay with it? We'll perform only at the end, so it's okay. We've rehearsed a lot. I just texted them, though, he replied. Perfect. So let's go on with the first one. The first part was easy. My fingers slipped through the notes I've decorated, and the sound was great. I closed my eyes, letting the music grow inside me, and then I made my first mistakes. I looked to the side, and Raffaele was there instead of Gabriel. That caught me off guard, and I misplaced the tone, desecrating everybody from the flow. I looked at Luca, searching for a friendly face, and he nodded, saying we should go again, which we did. My brain was going crazy. His perfume was all over us, and the memories from the old shows was there. He, for God's sakes, was there. How can I keep my cool? I was wondering as I opened my mouth to start singing, and my voice shook. I could hear their breathing, annoyed but yet respectful. By my fifth mistake, Raffaele snapped. How the hell are you even up to playing here? I stood up, annoyed. What did you just say? He left the bass in the corner and gave a loud sigh. You're doing it all wrong. How the hell are you to play here? He said, pausing like I was an idiot or something. Oh, because you're so good, right, Ryan? I said his nickname with disgust. Luca got off the drum and started walking towards us. I was already closer to him, and my blood was boiling with rage. You're not allowed to screw up, right? I yelled. You have a free pass to whatever comes with your nerves, am I right? I could feel the venom dripping from my tongue. I'm so sorry. My mistake is being a nuisance to you, the big star. He looked at me with the same amount of wrath, and I wanted to break something, even though I knew I wouldn't do any good. Maybe leaving the band was the best thing I did, Raffaele shot back. What did you just say? I asked. Raffaele, Luca called, and he looked at him. You didn't only leave the band. I walked the steps remaining, and right when he looked back, I punched him in the face. You idiot! Max! Luca screamed. Luca, I can't handle this, I said, almost out of breath. Raffaele was caressing his own face, but it didn't seem like he would get back at me. I'd love it if he did, though. It would be much easier to face Elisa. Go away, Marco, Raffaele said, his voice controlled. He called me by my name, not my nickname, and that made my stomach sick again. After this, I don't want to ever see you again. I said and left the room. Walking by the hallway, I could feel my eyes tearing, but I couldn't. He didn't deserve my feelings that way, not anymore. I went by the water place, grabbed one cold bottle, and pressed it above my forehead. Time seemed to stop, even though the watch on my wrist showed it differently. We spent more time than we should have on my mistakes, and I could hear the noises from the other bands playing outside. I just wanted some time alone. I felt entirely done. My whole body was heavy and my mind spinning with all those feelings unresolved. I bumped into Mattia, our bassist, but if I opened my mouth, I'd lose it, so I just caught off straight to my room and locked the door. The rehearsals today were completely done for me. Slipping through the window to the floor, I let myself finally cry in silence. Once recomposed, I took a shower and I fell into a dark and soundless sleep. Breakfast was weird enough, but not even Luca or Mattia said anything, which I deeply appreciated. My still reddish eyes should speak all they needed to know. According to them, we had rehearsals the whole day, with some time to spare in and out. The regular, basically. I would only meet with a douchebag after lunch, so the morning passed by just fine. We were able to do our songs with perfection, which reminded me of why we were called there in the first place, as opposed to Raffaele's speech from yesterday. And speaking of him, he was just now passing through the door. He didn't talk much, and neither did we. We prepared his bass. Meanwhile, Mattia sat in the corner and observed us with a worried look. Unlike the day after today, I didn't make any mistakes. We played like we were silently fighting the words unspoken rising through our fingers, going inside the sound like an atomic bomb. I lost track of time after the third song, and part of me was finally feeling completed somehow, and I wasn't going to admit that was his presence over there, so I just enjoyed the moment. And before I could see, Luca was telling us to take a break. I drank some water, gave a long sigh, and looked around, annoyed by how the tension between us could still cut through the air. My fingers shivered as I shoved my guitar back into its case. Every single muscle in my body felt awake, as if there was a knife waiting for Raffaele's words to thrust them down with full force. As I wrapped the chords to my guitar, I acted as if I was engrossed in whatever activity I was performing and cared very little for him, who stood way too close to the table. I could feel the irritation underneath my skin as my mind swirled in disarray. That's when I noticed it. My hawkish eyes peered at the blue glimpse of the inside of my bag, my old notebook. Before I was able to grab it, Raffaele's hand darted forward and plucked it up, opening it that effortless manner of his. I felt as if I'd been dunked into the ocean and I caged for air. There was a loose paper inside the notebook, one stained with old tears, smudged pencils, and a whole number of feelings, and that was the exact one he chose to pick up. I couldn't move while I watched him standing in front of the back cover of his lyrics on every single page of words I wrote after he abandoned me. Every line that was written and every word that was scripted in anguish. I hope it would one day get rid of my anger. Wait, stop. My voice sounded hoarse, the words choking the back of my throat. My heart was racing, yet Raffaele remained oblivious to this fact. His gaze lowered as he concentrated, his face growing tense with a frown. He didn't say anything, but I was certain he wasn't oblivious to it, the pain, the yearning that I had shoveled into the sheets. Those lyrics were not about him, only they were about me, about how I felt when he left, about how I wished for him with all my heart. He was quiet for a moment, his face a mix of shock and something else, something I couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. What is this? I clenched my fists, feeling exposed, as if he'd peeled back the scar tissue to pry out wounds I'd only learned to ignore. If you can read, then you know what that means. My voice came out sharper than I intended. cracking slightly, but I forced the words out, swallowing down the tightness in my throat. Raphael's fingers traced over the pages, his expression shifting as he read line after line. His usual guarded expression cracked, and for a second, he looked hurt, genuinely hurt, the way I'd been. I saw confusion flicker in his eyes, then something that looked almost like regret. "You wrote all this after I left?" His voice hit me harder than I expected. A quiet punch to the chest that stirred every resentment, every unfinished emotion I tried to let go. "What do you think, Raphael?" My voice rose, a mixture of anger and exhaustion bleeding through. "That you could just walk out and I move on, like nothing ever happened?" His mouth opened as if he were going to respond, but he hesitated, the words dying on his tongue. He looked back down at the lyrics, his face unreadable as he scanned the page. I watched him take it in, the rawness of what I felt, what I still felt. My hand twitched, with the urge to rip the notebook from his grip, to shove it back into my bag and bury it where it belonged. He exhaled slowly, and the sound filling the heavy silence between us. Then he closed the notebook carefully, his fingers lingering on the cover, his thumb brushing the worn spine. He held it a beat too long, like he couldn't quite bring himself to let it go. For an instant, he met my eyes, and the guarded mask he always wore slipped. I saw something real there. Regret maybe, or guilt. The raw edge of something I've been waiting to see for years. The moment stretched, and I almost thought he said something that mattered, something that might fill in the cracks he left in me. I wanted him to. I wanted him to admit he'd been wrong, that he missed me, that he regretted all as much as I had, even though I knew that would never happen. As I knew he was going to, instead of my secret desires, he shook his head, just slightly, and slipped the notebook back onto the table. He broke our gaze and turned, walking away as if he hadn't just left me standing there, heart exposed, every scar I tried to bury ripped wide open. He left, like he always did, without an explanation, without a backwards glance. I watched him walk away, feeling the lyric echoing in my mind, screaming out all the hurt I tried to bury, but it didn't matter, not to him, not to anyone. All I could do was rehearse and do my goddamn best. The air in the studio was thick with exhaustion and barely contained tension. I whipped the sweat from my forehead right when Luca's phone buzzed on the amp next to him. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "Guys, I've got to run and meet Lisa for a bit. She's stressing over tomorrow's stage setup and needs me to smooth things out." He gave us both a look, lingering on me, as if to say, try not to kill each other, and then grabbed his drumsticks, nodding to the door. "Just don't cause any more dents in each other's faces while I'm gone, alright?" Before I could, he was out the door, leaving me alone with Raphael. I fumbled with my bag, hyper aware of his presence across the room. The silence thickened, neither of us willing to break it, but after a few more minutes, the tension drained out of me, leaving only exhaustion. With a sigh, I slumped down onto one of the battered couches that lined the studio wall, leaning my head back, eyes closed. Surprisingly, I heard the scrape of Raphael's chair as he moved to sit on the other end of the couch. I opened my eyes to find him staring instead, his expression soft, almost distant. "This place feels the same," he murmured, more to himself than me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The studio has seen the highs and lows of our bands, of us, including the breakup. If I closed my eyes, I could still hear the laughter between sets, the pain in my fingers and in my throat, and how I wanted it to so badly not to end. Raphael must have been thinking the same, because he let out a quiet laugh. "Remember that night when Luca broke his drumstick in the middle of the set and we all tried to keep the beat by stomping on the stage?" I couldn't help but chuckle, a real smile breaking through for the first time since he'd shown up. Yeah, we all look ridiculous, but the crowd thought it was some kind of spontaneous showmanship. Raffaele grinned, the edge of sarcasm softening his expression. We were unstoppable back then. Or at least, we thought we were. He shifted, glancing down at his hands, and for a second, I could almost feel the warmth of what we once shared, like the ghost of an old flame that hadn't completely burned out. Yeah, I replied quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. We thought nothing could touch us. He paused, and I saw a hint of a smile fade, his gaze darkening slightly as he glanced at me. It wasn't all bad, was it? His tone softer now, the usual arrogance gone. I felt a lump form in my throat, a mixture of anger and nostalgia tightening my chest. No, I wanted to say. It wasn't. Instead, I shrugged, pretending indifference. Guess that depends on what you remember. Raffaele nodded, his jaw tense, and he looked away, focusing on the dim light hanging over the stage. I remember the late nights, he finally said, his voice barely audible, playing until our fingers bled, then collapsing on the couches. He looked down, my fingers absently tracing the worn leather armrest between us. I swallowed, feeling the weight of his words settling around us. It felt too close to what we used to be, too close to everything I'd spent years trying to forget. Before I could say anything else, he looked at me, his eyes holding a glint of the old Raffaele I used to know, the one who used to make me laugh, who made me want to stay up all night just so I could hear him talk about music, about everything he wanted to create. Do you ever wonder what could have happened if things were different? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My chest tightened, and I looked away, pretending to study the worn-down carpet. Sometimes, I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop it. I swallowed, feeling too exposed under his gaze, like he could see through the anger and the hurt I used to protect myself. The silence between us wasn't as sharp anymore, more like a truce, a temporary one, maybe, but a truce was all the same. For those few minutes, we didn't need to fight, didn't need to dredge up old wounds. We could just be the way we used to. After a while, the door creaked open, breaking the moment as Luca stepped back inside, a cautious look of relief on his face. Didn't kill each other yet, huh? He asked, his voice light but his eyes serious. Raffaele and I both gave small smiles, and neither of us answering. As Luca settled back in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Some invisible wall had cracked, if only a little. And despite everything, I found myself hoping it might break down all the way. A swarm of sponsors and their team ambushed me, and before I could even realize it, Luca and Raffaele were next to me. His face was a bit reddish, but nothing much. I glanced at him, and he looked so calm, almost indifferent, and I had to swallow down the irritation that was bubbling up all over again. The PR manager, a slick guy with perfectly combed hair and a grin that felt way too rehearsed, beamed at us. So, the fans are thrilled about a big reunion, he started, his voice slightly too excited. What can you tell us about what led to this split? I glanced at Raffaele again, fully expecting him to look as annoyed as I felt, but he barely reacted. He simply shifted his weight, crossing his arms as if he'd heard this question a million times before, like it was nothing. My blood heated a degree higher, but I forced my tone to stay even. You know how it goes, I managed, shrugging. People have different dreams. We just went our separate ways. Raffaele's mouth tugged at one corner, almost like he was suppressing a smirk. Something like that, he murmured, just loud enough for the mic to catch it, but without looking at me. The indifference in his voice hit me harder than I wanted to admit. The PR guy tilted his head, sensing tension and probably thrown by it. So, was it difficult seeing each other again after all this time? I swallowed, clenching my jaw for a second before answering. A little, maybe? I said, trying to keep it casual. But it's for the fans, right? They deserve a good show. Raffaele nodded, finally meeting my gaze, his face a neutral mask. It's not as difficult as people might think, he said with a shrug, his words carrying a knife edge that only I could hear. My fists clenched, but I forced him to relax. He always knew just how to get under my skin without even trying. I'm particularly very happy about this, Luca meddled. As a band, this is the dream place to be, and being with our original bassist and our new one will be unforgettable. The PR smiled at him and turned back to both of us. Oh, so no hard feelings? The PR guy pushed, his voice feigning innocence, eyes glinting with interest. None at all, Raffaele replied, his tone light, almost dismissive. The mic didn't pick up his next words, but I did. After all, it's just business now, isn't it? The indifference in his tone just felt like a slap. I forced a smile, ignoring the urge to let my real feelings show, but inside, I was fuming. Business? Is that all this was to him? Well, I said, my voice barely steady, I guess we'll see what the fans think when we get on stage. And with that, I left him behind. For a while, but I did. As soon as I was out of the view, I ducked into the nearest bathroom, turning on the faucet and splashing cold water on my face. I gripped the sink, breathing heavily, staring at my reflection. My face was flushed, a mess of anger and confusion staring back at me. Was it really just business to him? I thought bitterly. All those late nights we spent dreaming together, the hours perfecting our music. I always thought it meant something. But Raffaele had walked away from all, without a word, leaving me to pick up the pieces, to wonder what I'd done wrong. Maybe he never cared as much as I did. The thought tore through me, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. If he'd only told me he didn't love me anymore, or that the band wasn't what he wanted, at least I'd understood, but instead he left, taking every hope I had with him. I clenched my fists, the rage sharpening, slicing through the hurt. Fine. If this was just business to him, then I'd show him exactly how I felt on stage. Taking a deep breath, I straightened and splashed water on my face one last time before heading back to the hallway. And of course there he was, Raffaele, leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting for me. The sight of him stirred something in me, annoyance mostly, but I kept my expression neutral as I walked past. He matched my pace effortlessly, and I could feel the space between us charged with something I couldn't ignore. Must be nice, I muttered, loud enough from here. No worries, no responsibilities. Must be nice to just walk back in after everything, like nothing happened, he shot back, his cool voice but clipped. I couldn't stop myself. Yeah, easy for you, right? Just another show to put on. His eyes flickered, a trace of irritation creeping in. You think that's all this is to me? Isn't it? I countered, the words sharp before I could stop them. You left without a word, and now you're acting like it's no big deal. Raffaele took a step closer, lowering his voice like we were sharing some secret. It was never no big deal, and don't act like you got any clue what this is to me. You just moved on, pretending it didn't matter. I felt the sting of his words, but I didn't back off. What was I supposed to do? Wait around for an explanation? He flinched, just for a second, but it was enough. His eyes darkened, his voice rougher. Maybe I thought you cared enough to ask why I left. Maybe I thought you noticed I was gone. I opened my mouth, ready to say something snarky, but the truth of it hit too close. Instead, I forced a smirk. Oh, don't worry. I spent the last few years trying to forget what you meant to me. Raffaele's jaw clenched, a brief flash of hurt in his eyes before he masked it again. Well, you don't seem to have done a great job of it. He stopped walking, locked in a stare. The air between us hummed with everything we hadn't said, the tension thick. But there was something else there too, something I couldn't ignore, something I wasn't ready to face yet. That's just mean, after reading my lyrics, and you know it is. So for now, I'll ignore it and try to preserve whatever respect I have still for you. He'd probably answer, but fortunately, Elisa came in. Max, Raphael, 5 minutes till you're on. I followed them all to the stage, feeling the old lyrics burning in my soul. The memory of every unsaid word haunted us both as we prepared to face the crowd side by side. The stage lights blazed as we stepped into the spotlight, the crowd's roar fading into a dull hum in my ears. My heart raced, a chaotic mix of fear and defiance thumbing through my veins. Raphael and I took our positions at the front, guitars clutched tightly, the air between us heavy with unspoken tension. As the first chords erupted into the night, I poured every ounce of anger and heartbreak into the music. Every strum felt like a pulse of resentment, a cathartic release I desperately needed. I shot Raphael a fleeting glance, our eyes colliding for a moment before I turned away, refusing to let him see the turmoil churning inside. He matched my intensity, his voice slicing through the notes with a raw fury. You think you can just forget it all? He shouted, his tone echoing the desperation that gripped me. Maybe I can, I spat back, my teeth clenched, drowning my frustration in the music. The energy crackled between us, a storm of unspoken words and lingering hurt. I could see him inching closer, determination etched in his features, but I instinctively pulled away, heart pounding in my chest. We exchanged heated looks in every verse, our silent battle playing out on the stage. Raphael's gaze was fierce, a challenge that pushed me to confront the truth between us. I gritted my teeth, unwilling to back down, even as he closed the distance, his intensity drawing me in. Then, just as I was lost in the moment, my foot snagged on the edge of the stage. I stumbled, adrenaline surging as I teetered on the brink of falling. In a heartbeat, Raphael was there, hands gripping my waist, steadying me just before I lost my balance. The crowd erupted into cheers, but all I could focus on was the warmth of his hands and the way the tension shifted between us. We locked our eyes, and for an instant, the world around us faded. The anger that had fueled our music melted away, replaced by something deeper, an understanding we could no longer ignore. With a deep breath, I signaled for us to launch into our final song, the one that had been waiting for us, filled with hope and longing. As we played, the music enveloped us, our anger transforming into a haunting melody that resonated with our souls. Our harmonies soared, intertwining seamlessly, and I felt Raphael's voice blend perfectly with mine, an undeniable connection sparking between us. It was as if we were finally on the same page, singing about everything we'd fought through and the distance we traveled together. As we reached the climax, I let the music carry me, pouring out all the emotions into each note. We finished with a powerful chord that echoed through the venue, the sound hanging in the air like a promise. As the applause washed over us, a sense of peace settled between us, knowing we had finally sung our truth, if only for that fleeting moment. I get off there, almost running. I needed to be alone. I slammed the door to the rehearsal room, the sound echoing the silence that followed. My heart raced as I leaned against the wall to my steady breath. The adrenaline from the stage so coursed through my veins, mixing with the remnants of anger and betrayal. Moments later, the door creaked open. Raphael stepped in, his expression a mixture of remorse and determination. "Marco, wait," he said softly, stepping forward. I crossed my arms, trying to shield myself from the intensity of his gaze. "What do you want, Raphael?" "I didn't know you felt this way," he said, his voice strained. "So the lyrics will be mentioned after all. Damn. Can I have one peaceful moment?" I thought I was just dead weight to the band. With all the sponsors pushing me to change my style, my way of acting, my place in it all. I shook my head, frustration bubbling to the surface. I know you've always dreamed of being a solo bassist, but I never thought you'd leave how you did, or that you'd join another band. You cheated on me twice, Raffaele. I whispered the last bit. His eyes flashed with pain, and I could see the walls he built around himself start to crack. For an instant, I remembered it all without the bitter pain. The hugs, the kisses, the love words, the working and training, friendship. He must have seen my expression soften up because he said, I can't undo the past, Marco. I can only try to make it right for the future. I gave out a funny laugh. After all this time, be honest, what kind of future do you see? I asked with a sharp tongue and rolled my eyes, hoping the conversation was over, but as always, he took me off the edge. I want one with you, in it, again, he replied, stepping closer, desperation spilling from his words. The air between us thickened, heavy with the weight of everything we'd been through. But as I met his gaze, I saw something deeper, raw honesty, pain, and longing that mirrored my own. The anger that had kept me at a distance started to dissolve, replaced by a flicker of acceptance. I wanted to hate him for his actions, but our connection was undeniable. That familiar pull drew me closer, the tension shifting as if the universe were holding its breath. I can't just forget everything, Raffaele, I murmured, my voice softening as the walls I had built crumbled. You hurt me. I know, he replied, earnestness flooding his tone. The desperation in his eyes shifted to vulnerability. But I'm here now, and I want to make it right. I can't change the past, but I can try and build something new. His words hung in the air, a tentative promise that made the fight within me begin to fade. It's not going to be easy, I said, though the conviction in my voice was slipping away. He hugged me through the waist, and I smiled happily for the first time since stepping foot there. You're a goddamn playboy, aren't you? I said smoothly. Raffaele closed the distance between us, his intensity radiating like a storm. Before I could pull away, he cut my face in his hands and kissed me, a surge of warmth that caught me off guard. The moment felt electric, igniting a familiar fire been long extinguished. Just for you, he whispered against my lips, his eyes searching mine, filled with a longing just like mine. The walls around my heart trembled as I fought the urge to lean into him and let the past wash over us. But could we really go back? Would we let history repeat itself? I didn't have all the answers, but as we stood there, I knew we had a chance to build something new, and for the first time in a long while, that felt enough. Soon after the concert, that brought the love of my life back, Raffaele and I started to see each other again. Though we were in separate bands, it was still blissful, hanging out after practice, random jam sessions, and those late night talks, reliving it all. Things were not exactly like they used to be, but we were together, and that was something, right? The end. Have you ever given someone a second chance? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our rainbow force, and stay wholesome.